It's the dirty secret China denies. Forced organ harvesting, prisoners of conscience. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. There's a movie on Netflix called The Laundromat. It's based on the true story of the Panama Papers and rich people stealing everyone's money. But it's a reenactment starring Meryl Streep and Antonio Banderas, so it's actually interesting, unlike boring nonfiction shows that are just about news and stuff. Anyway, there's a scene in The Laundromat where police in China kidnap a woman doing Falun Gong and harvest her organs, leaving her dead.
He would say that the organs were harvested only after the prisoners were dead. But the Falun Gong were expendable, and a heart can bring $180,000 on the open market, depending on the blood type.
This is known as forced organ harvesting. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party's state-run trade in human organs. And now that it's been in a fictional movie with big-name stars, it somehow seems more real. The victims of China's forced organ harvesting are allegedly prisoners of conscience. That means they're political and religious dissidents, like Falun Gong members, and Uyghurs. Chinese officials deny the existence of a state-run organ harvesting scheme. A few years ago, they admitted that they used organs from executed prisoners. Those are people who were given death sentences for committing crimes. But they claimed that since 2015, China's official transplantation system has stopped using organs from executed prisoners. But Chinese officials have never admitted that they use organs from prisoners of conscience, even though they're still doing it. Remember, prisoners of conscience are arrested for their beliefs, not because they committed actual crimes. But there's plenty of evidence that proves the CCP is lying about organ harvesting. Shocking, I know. So is forced organ harvesting fact or fiction? In today's episode, we look at 6 things that show organ harvesting in China is sadly all too real. Number 6, unusually fast transplants. All over the world, people who need organs get on a waiting list. In the US, nearly 92,000 people are on the kidney transplant waiting list. That means a wait of several years for a kidney donor. In some states, depending on your blood type, it can be as long as 10 years. But not in China. In China, the wait can be as short as 2 weeks. And you can even schedule an organ transplant on a specific date. Good for you, bad for the organ donor. That's what Israeli surgeon Dr. Jacob Levy says. He points out that scheduling a heart transplant means scheduling someone else's death.
If a patient was promised to undergo a heart transplant on a specific date, this could only mean that those who promised that knew ahead of time when his potential donor would be dead.
Human rights lawyer David Mattis is the co-author of Bloody Harvest, a study into forced organ harvesting. He says scheduling transplants is possible because in China, there's a large supply of donors who are executed on demand.
They've obviously got a lot of people sitting around waiting to be killed for a transplant, and they're just picking the right person to be killed depending on who the patient is.
None of that waiting in long lines for organs like in backwards places like America. The Chinese Communist Party understands supply and demand, with Chinese characteristics. Number 5, transplant tourism. A BBC reporter went to a hospital in Tianjin City, China, and interviewed a Korean patient who came to China for a new liver.
This undercover reporter captures a Korean patient recovering from a liver transplant at a hospital in Tianjin City, China.
In the US, the median waiting time for a liver can be as long as 4 years depending on your blood type. But in China, the wait list is short, especially if you're not too picky about where the organs come from.
The nurse says they did 7 transplants on the previous day. In other countries, it can take years to get a suitable organ, but here it's only weeks.
Traveling to foreign countries to buy organs is called transplantation tourism, and it doesn't come cheap. A kidney, $62,000. A liver, $150,000. And a heart, between $130,000 and $160,000. That's according to an official 2007 price list on the website of the China International Transplantation Network Assistance Center, an organ broker in Shenyang. The website was later shut down. But at the time, China's organ transplant business was booming. Hospitals were hawking organs and offering deals to bring in transplant tourists from abroad, like the Kunming Kidney Disease Hospital in Yunnan, which told prospective customers that, in case of failure, we will continue to perform transplants until one is successful and will not charge for the repeated surgeries. Ethan Gutman, author of The Slaughter, The Inside Story of China's Organ Transplant Business, says there's a terrifying connection between transplantation tourism and jail dissidents.
They can't reach this level. This is live organ harvesting. Falun Gong in the main, but also Uyghurs, Tibetans, House Christians. These are the groups that have been targeted from the beginning, and they continue to be targeted. We see no hospitals closing. We see no transplant centers struggling. In fact, we see the opposite. We see construction programs, hundreds of hospitals, and it has become their bread and butter, an economic mainstay of their profession.
Yeah, for Chinese hospitals, it's their bread and butter, with liver on top. Number 4, China's false transplant data. China's Vice Minister of Health, Huang Zhefu, is in charge of China's organ transplantation system. Back in 2015, he claimed that there were 10,000 organ transplants per year in China. But the real figure could be 10 times that.
We are looking at not 10,000 transplants per year in China, but something more like 60 to 100,000 transplants per year in China. Now, this number is extremely upsetting, that we literally have no idea exactly where the sourcing of these organs comes from. Even if voluntary organ donations in China have gone up, they can't reach this level.
By insisting on a small number of transplants, China deflects uncomfortable questions about the source of organs. Because, as Gutman said, there's no way China's fledgling voluntary organ donation system is meeting demand. In 2018, China still had only about 6,000 official organ donors, who are said to donate more than 18,000 organs. Vice Minister Huang Zhefu claims the organs come from some of the 6 million people who died in intensive care. Here he is, weaseling his way out of a reporter's uncomfortable question.
They estimate it's about at least 100,000 transplants.
There's a nonsense. I don't want to answer the questions because no.
Well, how come I rang up? I was offered a liver very quickly from a hospital in China. How is that possible?
I don't want to listen and answer the question somebody with some political agendas. Well, okay, you understand?
Yes, I understand. You don't want to answer the question. Ethan Gutman, David Mattis, and co-author David Kilgore did a joint update to Bloody Harvest and the Slaughter in 2016. In it, they used a host of factors to stand by their figure of 60 to 100,000 organ transplants.
They kill people in a brutal way and then they sell their vital organs. The Nazis didn't do that.
Yes, as the Chinese Communist Party sees it, killing all those Jews in gas chambers? Total waste of good organs. And remember what I said earlier about how Chinese officials claim that they had 6,000 organ donors in 2018? Well, it looks like they may have completely made those numbers up. I know, you're shocked. Last year, a study came out that showed China's official organ donation numbers are likely falsified data. How did the researchers figure that out? By doing basic math. They found that China's data for voluntary deceased donors, kidney transplants, and liver transplants conform to 3 almost perfect quadratic equations. Yes, quadratic equations. Sorry for the flashback to high school algebra. The points on this graph show the official Chinese transplant data. The lines represent the quadratic formula. According to researchers, the data diverged from the formula by less than 0.08%. As the researchers said, we believe the assumption that these numbers emerged by chance or as a coincidence from organ donations taking place across China would require an unrealistic and implausible sequence of events persisting for 7 years. So in summary, Chinese officials are lying about their organ transplant numbers and trying to use high school math to cover it up. Okay, Mr. Simons, you were right. I am using algebra in real life. Number 3, doctor testimony. One way journalists and activists hunt for evidence of forced organ harvesting is by calling hospitals in China. A group of investigators, led by former Dr. Wang Zhiyuan, posed as family members of patients. In one call, a doctor admitted to having organs from prisoners of conscience.
哎，宋主任吗？
啊，您说吧。
哎，他那个医生跟他讲，就是说这个肾源挺好的，就是说他练功，人家练什么功？练法轮功，练法轮功就是练法轮功，身体都比较好嘛，练功就想。你要给他这么一个
这种情况，我们也有这种所谓的叫不是有呼吸或者有心跳的一些问题，我们会有。
Organs from Falun Gong practitioners are said to be in demand because they lead healthy lifestyles, which is a good reminder for everyone else living in China. Just to be safe, you should probably lead an extremely unhealthy lifestyle. In another case, a woman calling herself Annie said that her ex-husband, a surgeon, had harvested thousands of corneas from Falun Gong practitioners. She said the victims were killed and their bodies cremated.
I heard from my ex-husband that most of them had strong bodies. When their organs were harvested, they still had breath. After their organs were harvested, their bodies were thrown directly to the incinerator without any trace left.
No body, no crime. Walter White would be so proud. In 2018, a Falun Gong practitioner named Yu Ming went undercover as a patient looking for an organ transplant and secretly filmed his discussions with doctors in China. He released the videos earlier this year after escaping to the US. This is a conversation with a doctor who says he has done more than 500 liver transplants.
现在武警能做，北京可能是军队医院就武警现在能做，北大国际的感觉是我现在给他负责的。这武警呢，他的咱们公平质量严于保证。今天有一个，你不是记者啊？一看见不是。
You also asked the doctor about getting a liver from someone who practices Qigong. Falun Gong is a type of Qigong.
他说你可以找那些练气功的，他说练气功的那种调理好的，
可以看他的病情，能等咱就调好的。每次呢，我把信息给你，我把这些情况给你以后然后呢，然后你觉得年龄大，咱就再等下一个咱就等一个最好的。你的肝的质地很好，那肝这极品肝。
And how could you ever say no to the best liver ever? Number 2, witness testimony. Author Ethan Gutman has interviewed a lot of Chinese dissidents after they got out of prison. And they often describe the same pattern of getting oddly specific medical tests, you know, in between torture sessions.
I was severely tortured mentally and physically, but at the same time, they took all these Falun Gong practitioners to the nearest hospital and have a regular body check. They include chest X-ray, liver test is ultrasound, and a blood test every 3 months.
Another former inmate who also described similar medical tests added that prisoners were beaten in a way so as to avoid damage to internal organs.
They force you to renounce your belief. So if you don't do so, they would beat you up. They choose places like your legs, your arms, and your hip part, but your organ part, they don't touch.
It's really nice of the Communist Party. Even though they lock you up and make you do forced labor and beat you constantly, they still care about your health. At least your organs' health. And number 1, independent tribunal. For more than a year, an independent tribunal investigated the allegations of forced organ harvesting.
He agreed to establish an independent tribunal with a number of other distinguished colleagues and to shine a light on a very dark place.
Heading up the tribunal was Sir Geoffrey Nice. He's the guy who led the prosecution of Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic for war crimes at the UN's International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. The tribunal talked to experts, interviewed witnesses, and weighed up all the evidence. What did they conclude? Well, I'll save you months of boring stuff and get right to the heart of the matter. See what I did there? That's why they didn't invite me to testify. At any rate, the tribunal concluded that the Chinese Communist Party is guilty of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience.
We, the tribunal members, are all certain, unanimously and sure beyond reasonable doubt, that in China, forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience has been practiced for a substantial period of time, involving a very substantial number of victims.
Which is to say, for years, the Chinese regime has been killing people for their organs. I know that sounds bad, but on the other hand, they've also been getting away with it for a long time and making billions and billions of dollars. And you know what that means. China presents a huge opportunity for investors right now. So what do you think about the 6 things that show forced organ harvesting in China is real? Leave your comments below. And I hope you can support China Uncensored by contributing to us through the crowdfunding website Patreon. That's patreon.com/China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.